Hi, my name is Jarrett. I'm going to be showing you a climate labeling tool that I made for Washington in the United States. It takes information from NOAA's publicly accessible weather and climate data API, pulling from weather stations around the US, and in our case, from around Washington. So this tool fetches data using Fetcher to, excuse me, to create a database that has important features for our analysis. These features include the station name, the date at which a reading was taken, precipitation values, snow, fall values, snow depth values, temperature, and then latitude, longitude, elevation. And it creates a file that has these readings from each station over the course of a month. Sometimes a station does not record values for a day, or there are missing values from its readings because maybe it just doesn't pick up that data type. Anyway, those are stored in the raw data directory here. Then what we can use is either the Jupyter Notebook file or the main file. The Jupyter Notebook file will walk you through exactly how the data is processed and then how the unsupervised model is trained to predict different climate types or clusters, and then how we label those clusters into climate types. The main file just runs everything in one go and can be used to view the output, which is in the process directory here. When you run this and there's no existing raw file to pull from, it will just go and fetch from the API and then create a new. You can change write to true to override existing files in the process directory. And if you just keep it on false, you can then check what the output of these files are. So what we're going to be creating is something similar to this, where it shows each cluster for February, and each data point is a station, and then we've labeled those as different climate types. Okay, so first we're going to look at how the features from each station's readings look, and we see that the higher the elevation, the lower the temperature. We can see that there's positive correlation here, which means the higher elevation, higher the snow depth, and then there's positive correlation here showing that more snowfall is more snow depth. That all makes sense so far. What we're first going to do for an attempt to fill in the database a bit more is take readings that already exist out of all the readings for a month, readings for temperature that is, and then if there's any missing readings within there, we're just going to take the mean temperature and fill it back in with that value, just assuming that temperatures don't fluctuate too much over the month. Next, I made a function that called phone a friend that will allow each station to reach out a max kilometers of whatever specified and a max elevation difference in meters, whatever specified here, gather any missing information by borrowing it from nearby stations. It's not a cascading effect, it just reaches out, stores them separately, and then overrides in the end. So we see here that there's 623 stations that end up going through this process, and then we're going to check and see if the correlation matrix has changed much by doing that, and the magnitudes aren't too large, so we can see that it didn't mess up anything or strengthen any correlations too much. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to drop any features, drop any readings that have less than 3 features. So we can see here that the stations existing have a specific number of readings. 26 of them have only temperature readings, and 382 have all of the readings that we care about. So we're going to drop any of them that have less than 3 readings. So now after we do that, it's reduced to 524. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to only keep stations that have more than 15 days worth of data, and that allows us to get an idea for the month. Otherwise, it's a misrepresentation, so we drop down to 485 stations after doing that, and then we can just visualize how far stations reached out to get information. Next, we're going to use an iterative imputer to fill in the remainder. Now that we've tried to fill out the data frame as much as we can, we're going to just allow a algorithm to try and make its best guess for the remainder of the data. And we see that the correlations change a bit. It seems like the correlations are somewhat logical. The snowfall, the snow depth has gone up quite a bit, or snowfall relation to snow depth has gone up quite a bit, so that makes sense. Next, we're going to check for our file. This is, by the way, using one of the reference files. We're going to check that there is logical features in our data set. So we see that there's more snow days, and there's readings that have snow depth greater than 0, 3,562 of them in the winter. That makes sense. Next, we can check the histogram of total readings to each value. This just gives us a general idea that there's no outliers and that NOAA has vetted their data pretty well. Otherwise, we'd be seeing snow depth, out here in a ton of readings, or some readings or something. We'd have to cut them down, but we don't see that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change our database up a bit so that we've aggregated important features, and they'll give us a better idea of what types of clusters we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to get mean temperatures, we're going to take frost days, we're going to get total precipitation over the month, we're going to get snow days, and that'll help us label our climates later. So we're just going to perform some operations and change into those columns. And then next, what we're going to do is plot and look at that. And those are the histograms that relate to that information. And then we can start our model, and we're going to use k-means to cluster our data. So that requires scaling our data frame down, because k-means is a distance-based clustering method. So each data point will want to be on the same scale. What we're going to do is we're going to check all the different, we're going to make a value for each cluster value. So one cluster, two, or range 2 to 10, so 2 clusters through 10 clusters, so that we can graph them in their scores. So that runs through, and basically we have hyperparameters, the max number of iterations. I set to 1,000 just so that the convergence is 100% guaranteed for the model, and then the number of iterations is going to be 100, so it's going to check random starting points for each cluster and try to group around that, and the more the better, the more the merrier, I would say, because then we get all of our bases covered there. So now that we've done that, we can look at our telltale signs of what we can reduce or set our cluster number to. So the inertia, that is how tight the clusters are formed. And then the silhouette score is how well each data point fits into its assigned cluster. So it's generally best to keep the silhouette score as high as possible while trying to get the inertia as low as possible. And we can see that the silhouette score drops and then picks back up a bit, and also the inertia continues to flip downward, but we don't want to get too many clusters or else our data might just not make sense. So ideally it looks like here 4 different clusters may be our best bet. I created a function to automate this, and that's what we'll use in the main script, but if you run through this, it'll actually run it and output the result here. So we got 4s, we guessed. Okay, next it's going to use that 4 and create 4 clusters, show us the results. So we can see that some of the data points overlap into other clusters. We got a silhouette score of around 0.45, which is not too bad, but we can always make it a bit better. So I created this function to reduce the silhouette score, or sorry, reduce the amount of variance in the, or the, I guess, the distance that the cutoff for data points will be, and therefore increase the silhouette score. So this will just guess that if you put a 92% distance cutoff, then the silhouette score will jump up to 0.5 or whatever you specify. So then we use that threshold, and we can see that it's been cleaned up a little bit, only 0.5, so it's not going to be too noticeable, but this will be automated in the main and will work for each individual. Anyway, then what we can do is we can plot the remaining stations, and I just plotted them by elevation. So it shows here what we got, and there's a bunch of stations around the Seattle area. That's probably because reading the weather in that area is pretty important for commuters and whatnot. So there's probably more stations there, but that's okay. I mean, it shows us that, you know, we got a wide spread overall. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to do a, this method here is going to do a comparison between features, and it will return whether or not that feature is high or low compared to other features in the database. So when we run this, we can see that some elevations, some of those clusters, their average elevation is very high compared to others. Some are, you know, medium, low. So we have two very high. Also, we've done an inverse transform to get back from the standardized version of our data, and that gives us the center of our clusters, which is interpretable results. So we see for each cluster that there's a specific value parameter, and that's what we're going to use to classify the climate for that cluster. So we're going to do a concatenated naming convention, which is going to go through each feature, and it's going to take the value for that feature at a column, and then it's going to label it based off of how it compares to, I guess, heuristically, the logic of climate. Like if it's less than 32 degrees, we're going to say that that climate is freezing. If it's, you know, greater than 32 but less than 40 on average, then it's very cold. All of that. It's going to gather each data, or each descriptive title, and then it's going to concatenate it down here to name our climate. So I'm already ran that. I'm going to run this function that will name our clusters, and then we're going to plug into the function. And with this, we have names. So you see that there are very cold snowy mountains and there are freezing snowy mountains. It means that there were some that, you know, one of the clusters had an average temperature of less than 32. And even though both were very high in relative elevation, one was colder than the other. So we have freezing and very cold. There's cold lowland here, which is in the orange. And I'm actually going to change that to make sure that our sea level is low. Okay, what I did was I changed sea level to be the only indicator for a region to be coastal, because it turned out that our coastal region was just low relatively to the other ones. So if the region or the cluster is less than 200 feet elevation, or meters elevation, then we're just going to say that it's sea level. So anyway, the output will look like this, and we have pretty much similar to what we had when we ran the main function. So that is the climate labeler, and feel free to give it a go. Thank you.